Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to unbox and test drive this Vulcan MigMax 215 MIG welder. Let's get to it. I've been using this Lincoln Procore 100 welder with a gas attachment for probably 20 years now. It's gotten by. Occasionally, though, it gets frustrating, especially if I'm trying to do anything thicker. It runs off of just 110, and it just doesn't get terribly hot. It's now starting to get a little bit old and starting to slip. So I decided I wanted to upgrade, and I wanted to go to something that does 220. I picked up this MigMax 215 as a replacement. You might wonder why I didn't get one of the multi-process machines. They have both a Vulcan and a titanium. I think it's like a 220 or a 200, something along those lines. The primary reason I went this route is, well, the Vulcan had a 20% off sale, so I paid full freight for this. This is not sponsored in any way. But I wanted something that was just MIG. My thinking is that if I got something that's multi-process, I'm probably going to be sacrificing some sort of capabilities on something. And I don't need an additional TIG and stick because I have this Miller Dynasty 200, which is a really, really nice welder. And it does both TIG and stick. So I just needed something that would do MIG. So that's why I ended up with this. I think I paid somewhere around $800 for it, maybe a little bit less, out the door with a 1-year replacement warranty for it. Ground clamp seems pretty decent. I know I'd seen reviews on the titanium and they had complained that the ground clamp kind of sucked, but I don't know. I've seen better, but I've certainly seen worse. I'm really surprised at how thick the metal is on that. That's good quality. That's probably 18 gauge. Our accessory kit, I guess. Comes with a standard regulator, not a flow meter. Should be fine though. Seems decent quality. Some sort of an adapter, it looks like. We'll figure that out in a little bit. Comes with the gun. Power cord, which is nice, but problematic. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. Supply line for the air. And here's a 110 power cord. This is the drive wheel for the wire. It's really well marked for O30, O35 wire, or O45 wire. Interesting that it doesn't have an O23 or O25. On the machine is one for O25 and O30, O35. So it looks like this is a spare that allows you to go up to O45. I rarely use anything that thick, but it's nice to have. Here's the problem with the power. This is the plug that came with it. This is a typical 220 that you'd see for like a dryer or a stove or something like that here in the US. All of the 220 that I have here in my garage, though, I put in these, which you can see are not the same. This goes in and then turns to lock, so it's a positive locking. So I need to put one of these ends on here. If I had a If I had a female for this, I could make some sort of just a little connector that goes from this to that, which would let me take this welder to other places and plug it into like a dryer type socket, but I don't have one of those. So for now, I'm just going to cut this off, put one of these on, and then at some point in the future I could make an adapter that goes from that style female to this. Since I know at some point I'm going to want to make that little converter, I'll keep this plug end and I'll just add a female to it at some point. So I'll just cut it off about here and then put that end on it. I will say I'm pretty impressed with the thickness of this. This is good SO cable. All right, we're good there. Let's plug this thing in. Well, no smoke. That's a good sign. Let's get gas hooked up to it and put in some wire. This is argon CO2 mix 75-25. That's what I typically run on my MIG. On my TIG I use pure argon. The gun goes in from the front. Loosen this up until you can fully seat it. See that it's fully seated there. And we can tighten that back down, hold it in place. Then we need to hook up the controls on the front. I'm just transferring this O23 from the Lincoln over. I don't have any O30. In fact, this is really the only spool I have except a small, like 1 pound or 2 pound of flux core, which I'm not going to use. Nicely, this comes with an adapter that allows you to use the larger one. That Lincoln either didn't come with one or I lost it years ago and I had to make one. Alright, so it goes over the top of the spool and into this little flex thing. Now, we need to make sure that we have the right drive wheel on here. Again, this is O30, O35, and this is O25. Now, interestingly, I think the marking, when you're looking at it, is the one you're supposed to be using. So this O25 marking is for the groove that's on the far side, because the far side groove is what drives on this. I'll show you that here in a second. But if I look at these grooves, this one is a little thinner than this one. So that's a little counterintuitive, but it makes sense. When you're looking at it, whatever it says O25, that's the size wire. Put this back on. We feed the wire through. You can see it comes out here. I have to feed it into this. And it goes across that rear groove. Now I'm going to feed it through the gun as far as I can. The reason I'm manually feeding this and not just closing it down and driving it with the gun is I want to feel as I'm doing this, since it's brand new, to make sure it feeds all the way through nice and smoothly. And this way I can feel what it's doing. this tip, I don't know what size it is, wouldn't surprise me if it's set for 030, but I'm going to take that tip out. Oftentimes when you're feeding the wire, it'll get caught up right about here. So if I take that out, get the wire out, and I can feed it over the top a little easier. That's interesting. So it's just got a wire in here that kind of acts as a thread. And then this is smooth bore. The Lincoln, this is actually threaded and it goes down on. So a little bit different. You can see that this one is an 030 tip. So I'm going to change this. Here's an O23. Well, I don't know if you can read that, but it's actually O20. There we go. This is an O23 here that I'm going to put in. But first I'm going to continue feeding this until I see it come out here. Again, if I was just changing the wire on a known gun, I wouldn't do this. I would just use the drive wheel to push it. Alright, there we go. It went through nice and smooth, which is expected, but it's worth checking. Put our O23 tip back in. Put our shield cup back on. Alright, let's bring this down. We can tighten or loosen here, which will tighten down on this wire. If you go too tight, it'll actually smash that wire down, and it then becomes oblong and doesn't feed through the tip very well. But if it's too loose, it won't drive it. So, I don't know. We'll start with where it is from the factory, see what's going on. I'm going to turn it on and see if it feeds, then we'll run a bead. It's definitely louder than the Lincoln. Let's make sure that the gas works. It does. And let's see if it feeds. It does. One really nice feature that this one has, I see, is it's got a cold feed. The Lincoln does not have that, so in order to feed the wire using the gun, you pull the trigger, and that actually energizes this entire spool, which can be a little bit fun. This allows you to just push this button and it'll feed it without energizing the wire. I definitely like that feature. Alright, let's run a bead. Forgot to mention, it also came with this sheet metal gauge. They're kind of handy to have. And I never did figure out what this is for. I think maybe it's an adapter for the regulator. I don't know. I'll throw it in a drawer and it'll sit there forever. Now let's run some test welds. Got a couple of things I want to put together here. I'm just going to use a sheet of this steel here. It is 18 gauge. I'm just going to lay them flat and butt weld them together. Then I have some 1/4 inch angle here. Let's see. 1/4 inch. And I'm going to weld right in there, do a corner weld on it. So we've got a lot of steel there and there that are going to suck up heat. The Lincoln would have done this no problem. It would have really struggled with this though. So we'll see how it does here. Solid wire. It's 25% CO2 with an O23 wire. The 18 gauge says C5 is what we should be using. I didn't clean it really well. In fact, I didn't try to clean it at all. So it's a little ugly there, but the welds look really nice. There's the back side. Really good penetration. That just seemed really hot, so I've turned it down to about 3.5, where it says 18 gauge. We'll see how that looks. Well, that weld's sitting up pretty high. It's going to take a little bit of time to get used to the different settings on it, but boy, it looks really nice. Looks really clean. I turned the gas up a bit. Let's try the 1/4 inch. For the 1/4 inch, again, 25%, it says we shouldn't be doing it at all. But we're going to give it a try anyway. Just going to crank this up to a 9, so where it says 1/4 inch, and then maximum wire feed to start. We'll see how ugly this is. Definitely not the right size wire for this. Here's something interesting. I have the wire size set at 0.25, and the speed all the way up. Heat at 1/4, it doesn't react at all. If I turn it down, still no. No. So it says at about 6.5 it'll let me go there. If I go to O23 Wire, it'll let me do it at about 8.5. So it's actually trying to prevent me from doing it wrong. So we're going to just go manual, 1/4, all the way up. Don't tell me what I'm doing it wrong. Well, if it's in frame, that would help. It sounds like it's struggling a bit, but it doesn't look too bad. I'll finish this up and then I'll show you a little closer. So it was trying pretty hard. I'm going to go run this on the bandsaw and we'll see what kind of penetration we got. But I can say definitively that's better than the Lincoln. The Lincoln would not have melted into that host material on both sides like that at all. I don't have a way to easily etch this, but you can kind of see right here, it doesn't look like it got penetration down into this piece. It probably did here, but here it doesn't look like it did. Not a huge surprise since it's running way too small of a wire. Let's beat on it in the vise and see what it looks like. The weld is right back here, running this way. Yeah, as I suspected, it didn't have any penetration there. So, it looks like O23 wire just will not do that thick. Not a surprise. Does look like it got good penetration on that side anyway. Going to try that same test but with 1/8 inch instead. On 1/8, it says I should do J55, so J 5.5. Well, that was ugly as hell. It'll help if I turn the gas back on. Alright, let's give it another try. You can see, still 1/8 inch. This time with gas. Yeah, you can see that looks much, much nicer. I could tell just from the sound it was going way cleaner, way nicer than I'd seen on the Lincoln. So, well, there you have it. There you have it. There we go. A much, much nicer weld than I would have gotten out of that Lincoln. Don't get me wrong. That thing has served me well. Again, I've had it for probably 20 years and I've built a lot of things with it. But I'm glad that I've upgraded to this. Should give me a lot more capability and a lot less frustration. It's probably a better welder than I am. Seems to be a great mid-range piece of equipment. Certainly will do anything that I need it to do. Thanks for watching.